This video is all about the AV20 home theater processor and AMP20 multi-channel power amplifier from Marantz. Now in 2024, Marantz introduced their flagship AV10 processor and AMP10 amplifier, setting a new benchmark for performance. Now these two new models come in at about 20% less, making them a compelling option for so many users. Now this is going to be an in-depth video where we will cover all the features, the tech, and the details. So if you're just looking for specific comparisons or want to jump to the section that's most relevant to you, you can check out the chapters down below. But if you're seriously considering these models, you should stick around. We're going to give you a ton of valuable info to help you make the best choice. And remember, when you purchase from Audio Advice, you get access to our team of experts who can help you every step of the way. And if you find this video helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more home theater content. Now let's get started. Okay, now before we dive into the specifics of the AV20 and the AMP20, let's take a quick look at Marantz's heritage and how they've maintained their signature sound over so many decades. Marantz was founded by Saul Marantz in the 1950s and has built a reputation for producing some of the most beloved audio gear in the world. Now today, vintage Marantz equipment still commands high prices on the used market. To ensure the brand's signature sound continued, Marantz created the position of sound masters. Their role is to evaluate the sound of prototypes and adjust parts and circuitry to maintain the audio quality that has defined Marantz for so many decades. Now, just like the AV10 and the AMP10, the new AV20 and AMP20 are produced in the Shirakawa Marantz factory in Japan. One really cool part about this factory is that they are fully vertically integrated, meaning everything from concept to design to prototyping to full production is done at this facility. This enables the engineers to interact with each other in a bespoke-like environment to really put passion into building the products coming out of the factory. We can just imagine the conversations between the sound masters and the design engineers as they hash out ways to make their gear sound the absolute best. It almost harkens back to the day when Saul Marantz made everything at his factory in New York. Also, almost everything made in the Shirakawa factory has a full 5-year parts and labor warranty, including these two new models. So with all that in mind, let's dive into the AV20 and see what it brings to the table compared to the AV10. Now Marantz really stepped things up when they first introduced that AV10 with 15.4 channels of processing on board. We just loved the 4 independent subwoofer channels along with enough channels for high channel count home theaters. Ever since their first processor, the AV500 in the early days of home theater back in the 1990s, Marantz home theater gear has always had the latest features and plenty of input flexibility. Now the new AV20 is no different and actually is pretty darn close to the AV10. The channel count is just slightly less at 13, but it still has 4 independent subwoofer channels. This would give you plenty of channels for a multi-row home theater with the ability to have your 3 main front channels, 1 set of front wide, a set of main surround channels, a pair of back channels, and 4 height channels for a total of 13, plus up to 4 subwoofers that you can calibrate individually. Now the AV20 even has a newer HDMI board than the AV10 with all of the inputs supporting 8K 40 gigabits per second. It also includes AMD's FreeSync, which is a branded version of VRR. Now the AV20 is also loaded with inputs and connectivity options, making it a pretty versatile hub for your entire theater setup. Immersive surround sound is included for just about everything with Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, IMAX enhanced audio, 360 reality audio, and even Oro 3D. There are 7 HDMI inputs and 3 outputs. You get 1 moving magnet phono input, 2 Toslink, and 2 coax digital inputs, and for those of you with older video sources, you'll even find 2 composite video inputs and 1 component video input. Both of these also offer upscaling to the HDMI outs, which means that you can still hook up that legacy Laserdisc or DVD player if you still have one. Plus, like all Marantz gear, HEO streaming is built in, as is Bluetooth with retransmit, and it is Roon ready. We were also really pleased to see that Marantz kept the balanced audio connections along with the RCA outputs for all of the channels. And like the AV10, you get an additional 2 zones of preamp outs for the other rooms in your home. In addition, room correction comes standard standard with the Odyssey Multi-Q XT32. You also get Dirac Live capability with an optional purchase of the Dirac software. While we are big fans of Dirac and do wish Marantz would have included that for free, Odyssey is far easier to use for most people and has target curves, so it's no slouch. It does an excellent job of fixing room issues, especially if you don't want to pay extra and go through the setup of Dirac. But if you do end up using Dirac, we have the #1 tutorial in the world that walks you through the entire setup process that I will link down below. Now, every time we set up a Marantz product, we are really appreciative of how easy they have made it for someone that's just getting into this. Their own screen and guided setup menu are incredibly well thought out and guide you through the setup process step by step. Even if you don't fully understand the naming method for all of the various effects channels, Marantz gives you clear visual guidance so you can easily match up the speakers you have and where they are placed to the correct type of assignment. This isn't just in the AV20, but it's in all current Marantz products, and we just love that. Now, we do have one nitpick here though. We do wish that they made it a bit easier to get creative with channel assignment. With this many channels, it'd be great to assign more than one pair of surround speakers for those multi-row theaters that a lot of people have. We often see larger rooms using 2 or more pairs of main surround speakers, and while the typical way to do that is with splitters, which don't allow for individual fine-tuning, there is actually a workaround here. If you go into the AMP Assign menu and select Custom, you can use the free assign feature to double up a surround channel. For example, in a 7.2.4 layout, you can assign the surround channel to both the surround and height 3 pre-outs. It's a little bit tricky to set up, but it does give you the ability to run 2 pairs of surround speakers. But still, we'd love to see a more straightforward way to manage that kind of configuration. We also like that you can set up the unit via a web interface that you can easily access by typing in the assigned IP address into the browser. If you know what you're doing, this is much faster, though it doesn't include that self-guided portion like the on-screen version. Now, another cool thing is that you can set up your 2-channel music playback to actually have different crossovers than for theater, or even make them full range, which many audiophiles will really appreciate. The 2 speaker presets are also especially useful. You could have one for a small group and another where you measured all of your seats to average things out for a big crowd, or even have one preset for Odyssey and another for Dirac, allowing you to compare the 2. Marantz makes it super easy to switch between presets with the Smart Select function, and you can even store up to 3 Dirac Live filters under a single preset for a lot more flexibility. Now, moving to the inside, the AV20 looks pretty similar to the AV10, and they even share the same exact power transformer. The design of both is really well thought out, as they have a large, fully discrete power supply at the front of the unit to minimize noise. They laid out the audio boards for a very short signal path to improve performance too. Marantz even considered the chassis in both with the super rigid construction on them. The AV20 is slightly less deep, which might be a factor for some people, as the AV10 at 19 inches deep did not fit on every shelf. The AV20 is only 18 inches deep, which gives you a little bit more room. Now, for those of you where the 13.4 channels of the AV20 are more than enough, you might wonder, why would you even consider the AV10? Heck, they both use the same ESS ES9018K2M DACs with 9 in the AV20 and 10 in the AV10 for those extra 2 channels. So where is the difference? Well, it comes down to the sound with the extra love that Marantz has given the AV10. The HDAM boards Marantz uses in the AV10 are just flat out more sophisticated. HDAM stands for Hyperdynamic Amplifier Module. These use all discrete components and take the place of cheap op amps used by many companies. Marantz makes these in such a way that their sound masters can tune them by putting in better parts, and they are even tuned for the application they will be used in. They really were a brilliant idea when they developed them a few years back. Now, there are 3 big differences between the boards in the AV10 and the AV20. The AV10 uses MELF thin film resistors that are well known in the high-end audio world for better audio quality. The power supply caps used are surface mount on both, but those in the AV10 are higher capacity. And finally, the board itself is a 4-layer board with separate layers for each channel, a layer for the power supply and one for the ground. The AV20, on the other hand, separates the channels but combines the ground with both and has the power supply on one of the channels for a total of 2 boards. There's also a slight difference in the way the entire chassis is made for the AV10, with bigger layers speakers for more rigidity. So overall, when you compare the AV10 to the AV20, it comes down to the AV10 being more finely tuned for better audio. In our listening, we couldn't really tell much of a difference in how immersive the effects were on one compared to the other, but it is smoother sounding overall to us. This really comes out in 2-channel listening comparisons, so if you do a lot of music listening and you have high quality speakers, you'll probably appreciate the extra tuning that the AV10 received. Even the phono boards are better in the AV10, which might help you put off buying a separate phono preamp. However, if you're really into vinyl or have a moving coil cartridge, we would recommend moving up to a separate phono preamp anyways. But if you want the best sound Marantz has to offer in a surround sound processor, again, the AV10 will be your best bet, but you can certainly save some money and some space with the AV20, and for all but the pickiest listeners, it will do an outstanding job. Now, let's shift gears and talk about the AMP20. Comparing the AMP20 to the AMP10 is not quite as clear-cut as the processors, and it's going to come down to more of your use case. Both of these are multi-channel Class C power amplifiers. The AMP10 gives you 16 channels, while the AMP20 has 12 channels. Both use a toroidal power transformer and incorporate the Marantz HDAM SA2 modules. And these are the better 4-layer boards in both. The power supply layout is well thought out, just like the processors, with great isolation, and they even have the same toroidal transformer. But the AMP10 has one feature in the chassis that might offer a tiny bit of audio improvement. The side panels are 2.5mm aluminum, while the AMP20 uses 1.2mm steel. But again, overall, in our opinion, you probably won't distinguish much of an audio difference between these two at all. Now, the business end of the rear panel looks pretty much identical, with the exception of more channels on the AMP10. You get the same very solid binding posts on both models, and both also have RCA and XLR inputs, which is great to see stick around on the AMP20. Now, physically, in some environments, the AMP20 might have an advantage here. The AMP20 tops out at 17.4 inches deep, while the AMP10 is 19.2 inches deep. When you take into account your connections, they will add some depth to this number, especially if you're using XLR connections. So the AMP10 might be too deep for some shelves, while the AMP20 saves you about 2 inches. But it's worth bearing both of these dimensions in mind when looking at either one, as they are both very, very stout units. Now, both units are rated at 200 watts per channel, with one channel driven at a very low distortion number of 0.05%. Now, this is at 1000 hertz, a very easy frequency to deal with, and we do wish Marantz specified these at 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. These are impressive, as the power does not drop out at all with 5 channels driven at 0.7% distortion. 4-ohm power is nice too, as it doubles down with 2 channels driven at 0.7% distortion too. Now, with virtually identical boards and sound, it will come down to your use case here. However, if you are a somewhat creative home theater enthusiast, you will find a couple of the features both of these share open up some very interesting possibilities. Both the AMP10 and AMP20 have what Marantz calls BTL, which basically means bridged. This lets you take 2 channels on the amp and combine them into one, with a doubling of your power out into 8 ohms. You simply connect your incoming channel to the odd number input of the pair you have bridged, and then you have doubled your power. So when you engage BTL, you are getting 400 watts. Another feature to consider is what is called bi-amp mode. This again takes the odd number input and sends the same signal to both channels. If your speakers are set up for bi-wiring, you could then have one channel of the amp doing the treble and the other channel doing the bass. Okay, now let's think about some options here. Maybe you are like a lot of people and you have a 9-channel system, not counting the subwoofers. We see this a lot with your main front 3, main surround, rears, and 1 pair of height speakers. This would mean that with the AMP20, you could take those extra 3 channels and either bridge them to send double the power to your main front 3, or use them in bi-amp mode, whichever of the 2 methods you determined worked best for your ears. Now, for those of you with 11 channels, where you have the same layout as the 9-channel user, but with 4 height channels, you will still have that spare channel to use to either bridge or bi-amp for your all-important center channel. And if you look at the AMP10, you are probably coming up with some really creative ways to use all of those extra channels. We even know of some people who have taken things to the extreme with 2 AMP10s, providing 32 channels that you can configure in the best way possible for the 15.4 system using an AV10. Now, some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, the AV20 has 13 channels plus the subs. how will the AMP20 work for me? Well, the answer is if you max out the AV20, you'll need to either move up to the AMP10 to cover all your channels or buy a better stereo power amp for your main speakers for music listening. The separate stereo amp option would allow you to use the less expensive AMP20 for your 11 remaining channels and leave a spare to bi-amp or double the power for your center channel. This is what we recommend in most cases if you have the space, as the difference in the price of these two puts you close to some good 2-channel power amps, or even less in the case of the excellent sounding Marantz Class AB7025 2-channel power amp. Overall, Marantz certainly has you covered for all possibilities with these two power amps, and which is best for your system might not be perfectly clear until you consider all the options that they can provide. For a lot of Marantz fans with the AV8805 or even the older 7706, you've got a lot of reasons to step up to the new tech to get better subwoofer control, the Dirac option, the latest HDMI, and not to mention improved audio. And for anyone looking at a high channel count surround sound processor, it is one of the most affordable options at this channel level. Plus, it sounds great and is super easy to set up. Like the AMP10, the AMP20 provides tons of great power all in one package with some really slick configuration options. Plus, for many of you, it might be a good excuse to move out of that cobbled together stack of power amps you're currently using to drive your multi-channel theater system. Now, I hope that this video has given you a good overview of these two new units from Marantz. If you do have more questions, our experts are just a call, chat, or email away at audioadvice.com, and we are more than happy to help you. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss out on any of our latest content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.